The night shift at Kentucky Fried Chicken has always been uncomfortable for me. There's something about the loneliness of that empty parking lot, the dim light of the overhead lights that makes you feel, I don't know, small, lonely. Even though there were several people attending the restaurant, I had 2 hours left to go, and with luck, I would get home early. I decided to take my break to smoke a cigarette. The night was especially cold, and before I knew it, winter was coming. I stayed near the back door where we employees went out to breathe some fresh air between orders. The night was calm. Everything was empty, just a few cars in the parking lot. I lit my cigarette and looked at the ground. I could feel the tiredness building up in my body, but at least it was Tuesday, which I was happy about since I didn't work on Wednesdays or Thursdays. As I inhaled, something in the corner of my eye made me stop. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But there was something. Someone was there. I looked toward the parked cars and didn't see anything right away, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. I let out a nervous laugh. Surely it was Jake, one of my coworkers who enjoyed bothering the others during breaks. It wouldn't be the first time he tried to scare someone, so I decided to approach to see if I could catch him before he did it to me. "Jake, that's enough." But there was no response. I kept walking past the parked cars, hoping to find Jake or the prankster on duty. I walked past the vehicles looking for any sign of movement, but all was still, silent. Whoever was pulling this prank was really committing to it. Then I saw it. In the distance, beyond the cars in the parking lot, a figure was silhouetted against the dim illumination of the ceiling lamps. He was tall, thin, almost unreal. He was standing with his back turned, as if he didn't know I was watching him. The figure was completely white, but not like an albino person. More like it was made of something different, almost translucent. It didn't seem to move. I froze for a few seconds trying to figure out what I was seeing. It wasn't Jake, that was for sure. The figure finally began to move, slowly, very slowly. His movements were clumsy, as if he was learning to walk, each step seeming to cost him immense effort. Sweat began to bead on my forehead. That wasn't a toy or a disguise. Something was very wrong. I took a step back, not taking my eyes off it. The figure was still approaching, faster now, as if its erratic gait had turned into a determined march. Panic hit me full force, and before I knew it, I was running back toward the back door of the restaurant. I entered the restaurant, nearly breaking down the door. The sound of the metal closing echoed loudly in my ears, but I didn't care. I was breathing heavily and leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. My heart was pounding hard in my chest, and for a moment, I thought I might pass out. I looked around me. No one seemed to have noticed what was happening. Everyone was still busy preparing orders or clearing tables. I looked for Jake, but he was nowhere to be found. Maybe he had hidden inside, and I was freaking out over a bad joke. I approached one of my coworkers and asked him if he had seen Jake. He looked at me confused and said he hadn't seen him in a while. That worried me even more. I told him what I had seen in the parking lot, trying to sound rational, even though I knew my tone didn't help. At first, he thought I was making a joke, but just by looking at my face, he realized I was serious. They called the police, but when they arrived, they found nothing. They searched the parking lot with flashlights, but there was no trace of the white figure or Jake. The worst was when they went to check the security cameras. The boss wasn't there, and no one else had access to them. That only left us with more questions. I went back to my workstation, but I couldn't concentrate. The clock was ticking slowly. Each second seemed to last an eternity. My mind kept going back to that figure I had seen, the way he moved, and the fact that Jake didn't show up. Something inside me told me that the two events were connected, but I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to accept what I had seen. Every now and then, we all went to check if Jake showed up, but there was no sign of him. It was still too early to call his family or make a fuss. In everyone's eyes, an employee had simply walked off the job. By the time the shift was over, the feeling of discomfort had grown so strong that I felt dizzy. I couldn't get that image out of my head. That white figure that seemed out of this world. Finally, it was time to leave. Tom offered me a ride home, but I didn't want to intrude. The last thing I wanted was to be a burden, so I turned him down. I just wanted to get to my car as quickly as possible and get the hell out of that place. I grabbed my stuff and went out to the parking lot, trying not to look into the dark corners. I got to the door and opened it quickly, making sure everything was okay. I locked the doors as soon as I sat down and sighed in relief. At least in here, I could be at ease. I started the car and prepared to pull out of the parking lot. I was calmer, almost relieved. But as I was driving, I heard a sound. It was a soft noise, almost imperceptible, but clear enough to make me turn my head. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw it. There it was, that same white figure, now in the back seat, watching me. Fear paralyzed me. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I tried to understand what was happening. The car door had been locked. No one had entered. How the hell had it gotten there? The figure leaned forward, stretching its hands toward me. I tried to turn my head to get a better look at it, but before I could react, its hands closed around my face. Despite her weak appearance, she had incredible strength. She crushed my skull against the seat, and it felt like my head was going to explode. I started screaming as desperately as I could. I couldn't get free. The being had so much strength, she was going to break my skull. I lost control of the car. I couldn't see anything, but I could hear. I heard the sounds of the other cars braking. I knew I had lost control. In an act of desperation, I accelerated the car even more to stop this being as soon as possible. And in a matter of seconds, I heard a crash, and everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I was in an ambulance. The white light from the ceiling blinded me, and the sounds of sirens echoed in my ears. 2 paramedics were standing next to me, one of them asking me questions I barely understood. My head was pounding, but I was alive. I asked about the being, about the figure in the car, but the paramedics looked at me confused. They said they hadn't found anyone else in the car, that I was alone when they rescued me. That didn't make sense. I had seen it. I had felt it. I knew it wasn't a hallucination. When the police arrived at the hospital, they asked me about the accident. I told them everything, even though I knew it sounded crazy. I had no way to prove what I had seen, but I was sure the figure had been real. They tried to reassure me, saying that the blow to my head could have caused visions. The next day I was feeling better, and instead of going home, I decided to go to Kentucky the first thing in the morning. When I talked to my boss, he told me that there was no sign of Jake. My coworkers and I told him to check the cameras. What they saw left them frozen in their tracks. The white figure, the same one I had described, appeared on the footage, walking slowly across the parking lot, the night Jake disappeared. No one knew what or who it was, but from that moment on, everyone knew Jake wasn't coming back.
Hillcrest Lane is a quiet place. The kind of suburban street where every house looks the same. Big lawns, 2-car garages, lights off by 10 p.m. You'd think a place like this would have security cameras or alarms. But that's the thing about the people in neighborhoods like this. They don't expect trouble. They assume danger stays far away in these parts of town, which works for guys like me. I was standing in the shadows, just outside the side gate of a house that I'd been watching for a couple weeks, 421 Hillcrest Lane. It belonged to a guy in his early 40s. He lived alone and worked a boring 9-to-5 job. Every night he came home, parked his car in the driveway, and disappeared until morning. No guests, no family, just him. I waited just to be sure, glancing at my phone. 11:42 p.m. The lights had been off for over an hour. Perfect. The gate creaked softly as I pushed it open, slipping into the backyard. I'd chosen this house for a reason. No dog. Had an alarm system that I could easily defuse, and a sliding glass door with a lock I could easily pick. I put on my gloves and started working on the door, and within 2 minutes I was in. Inside, the house was dark and still. My eyes adjusted quickly as I took in the layout. Living room to the left, kitchen straight ahead, a staircase leading to the second floor. My heart raced, but it was the familiar thrill of the job, the rush of knowing I was in someone else's space, with their belongings at my fingertips. I made my way through the living room, careful to step lightly. No need to rush. I'd start upstairs, go through the bedroom, grab anything valuable, then be on my way out. But as I reached the bottom of the stairs, something caught my attention. A door, half open, at the end of the hall. The smell hit me first. It wasn't rotten or bad, but it smelled more like a strong disinfectant, like bleach or formaldehyde. I didn't know for sure, and I got curious. I flicked on my flashlight and shone it down the narrow staircase. I realized it was a basement, but something was off. I descended the stairs slowly, the beam of my flashlight bouncing off the walls. At the bottom, the basement opened up into a larger room. But this wasn't the kind of basement people use for storage or laundry. The floor was smooth, polished concrete, and the walls were lined with thick soundproofing foam. A large metal table sat in the middle of the room, surrounded by strange tools, scalpels, pliers, some other instruments I didn't recognize, and on the shelves lining the walls, glass jars, dozens and dozens of them, neatly arranged, each one of them holding something small and twisted. I stepped closer, holding my breath as my flashlight revealed their contents. Locks of hair, tied into little knots, floating in some kind of liquid. And not just hair, other things too. Fingernails, teeth, eyeballs. I stumbled back, my heart slamming in my chest. My hand knocked into something on the table, sending it clattering to the floor. It was a book. I bent down to pick it up, my hands trembling as I flipped it open. It was an album. The first photo was a woman, mid-20s, smiling into the camera. The next page showed her again, but this time, her smile was gone. Her eyes were wide, filled with terror, and her hands were bound behind her back. In the third photo, she was dead. The life drained from her face. Her skin was pale. Her mouth was frozen in a final silent scream. It looked like the life had been drained from her face, and the same thing repeated over and over. But each time, the victim was someone different. I slammed the album shut, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't just wrong. It was inhuman. It was at that moment I realized I had stumbled into the house of a serial killer. And then I heard something that made the hair at the back of my neck stand on end. A soft whimper. Faint but unmistakable. I turned, sweeping the room with my flashlight, and froze. In the far corner, strapped to a metal chair, was a woman. Her wrists and ankles were bound, and duct tape gagged her mouth. Her eyes, wide and terrified, locked onto mine. She was alive. I rushed over to her and ripped the tape from her mouth. She gasped, trembling, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Please, help me," she rasped, her voice barely a whisper. "He's coming back." Ice filled my veins. I fumbled with the ropes binding her, my hands shaking so badly that they kept slipping. Her eyes darted toward the stairs, terror creeping into me, spreading like wildfire. We had seconds, maybe. Then we heard it. Not footsteps, but the quiet hum of a nearby TV screen flickering on. It showed grainy footage from hidden cameras inside the house. Each room, each window. One by one, we watched as the windows sealed themselves, thick metal slabs sliding into place with a heavy finality. Doors slammed shut and locked, as if triggered by some automated system. Everything locked down, as if some failsafe had been activated. Panic clawed at my throat. I spun around, my flashlight flickering just as the sound of footsteps echoed from the stairs. "No, no, no," I whispered, backing away. Then, he appeared. The man who took those dreadful photos, the homeowner. He stood at the foot of the stairs, calm as death, with a look of twisted amusement. His eyes flicked between me and the woman, as if he was deciding who to kill first. In his hand, he held a long gleaming knife. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, his voice low and almost disappointed. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. If I had any chance of escape, I'd have to get past him first. And even then, the whole place was sealed shut. He started down the stairs, slow, savoring every moment. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a metal rod, and held it in front of me. My heart pounded so loudly it drowned out everything else. "Stay back!" I shouted, but my voice wavered, unconvincing. He smiled, a slow, deliberate grin that sent chills down my spine. "You don't understand," he said, his voice calm, almost playful. "This is my home. You're the intruder. You're supposed to attack me. I'm supposed to say stay back." Before I could react, he lunged at me. I swung the rod with everything I had, but he was too fast. His knife slashed across my arm, sending a searing jolt of pain through me. Blood poured from the wound, staining the floor, and I fought to stay on my feet as dizziness washed over me. At that moment, I realized I wasn't getting out of here alive. Not in this basement, not against him. He lunged again, knocking the rod from my hands. It clattered uselessly to the floor as I fell back, crashing hard. The air rushed out of my lungs as he pinned me down with his foot, pressing against my chest. The knife glinted in the dim light. Raised slowly, he aimed at my throat. This was it. Time slowed as I braced for the end, watching the blade descend. But then, she appeared out of nowhere. The woman I'd freed. She was bloody and trembling, but she was alive. She swung the rod I dropped with all her strength. A raw primal scream ripping from her throat as the heavy metal connected with the back of the killer's skull. The crack echoed through the basement. His body crumbled on top of me, unconscious, his knife clattering to the floor. I shoved him off, gasping for air, my chest heaving. Together we bound him to the metal chair, making sure he couldn't move. His head lolled to the side, blood dripping from the gash in his skull. He was out cold, but we didn't take any chances. The house was still locked down, but the woman, named Sarah, knew how to disable the security system. She'd been watching and learning. Within minutes, the doors clicked open. We didn't waste a second. We ran, through the basement, up into the house, and out into the night. Cold air finally hit my face like a slap. And for the first time since stepping into that nightmare, I felt like I could breathe again. My arm throbbed, but I didn't care. We reached the street, and Sarah, with trembling hands, started calling the cops with the phone she had retrieved from the killer's pocket while tying him up. I simply collapsed onto the curb, staring up at the night sky. Rain falling in soft droplets. I was alive. I had come so close, too close, but I made it. As the distant wail of sirens grew louder, I closed my eyes, whispering a silent thank you to God, and quietly slipped out of there before the cops arrived. I'd been reckless, greedy, and walked into the wrong place, thinking it would be easy, but I survived. After that night, I never wanted to rob again.
I never considered myself a paranoid person. I never understood those who look 4 times before closing the door, or who are startled by a noise in the middle of the night. We lived in Seattle, a quiet neighborhood, away from all the chaos of downtown. My parents were Chinese immigrants, worked hard to give us a better life here. My mother was always very careful, a woman who made sure everything was in order. My father, on the other hand, was more laid back, a man who relied on people's kindness. Make no mistake, I always knew there were bad people on the street, but up to that point, I'd never encountered any of them. That night, my father had come home from work a little later than usual, even though it was still daylight since he was going to work in the early morning. It was not unusual for him to arrive tired, but this time he seemed more exhausted than usual. I watched him through the window as he came into the house, reaching into his pocket for his keys. My mother was in the kitchen, finishing up dinner. Outside, the afternoon was quiet as usual. I was just about to go say hello to my dad when I saw something out of the ordinary. 2 hooded men ran up to where my dad was. One of them had something in his hands. Before I could see what was happening, I ran to tell my mom. I heard a loud noise followed by a muffled scream. I ran down the stairs immediately, not knowing what I would find. I saw my father on the floor, convulsing, while 2 hooded men surrounded him. One held a taser in his hand, while the other kicked him mercilessly. I couldn't process what I was seeing. My father was being attacked in the open doorway of our own home. My first reaction was to run toward him, but one of the men looked in my direction and I just froze on the spot. Not out of fear, but out of pure survival instinct. My legs didn't want to respond, and in that second of indecision, they had already entered the house. They closed the door behind them and advanced. My mother heard the noises and appeared with a baseball bat. I don't know where she got the strength to face them, but it didn't last long. One of the guys disarmed her in one move, and she ended up on the floor next to my father, who had been dragged inside the house. They beat her repeatedly. Purely on instinct, I ran to the basement to hide. From the basement, I could hear the men talking to each other. They were not stealing anything. On the contrary, they were destroying everything in their path. They were breaking furniture, throwing dishes on the floor, tearing pictures off the wall. They were doing it with restrained anger. But they weren't taking anything. That was what alarmed me the most. This was no ordinary burglary. This was something else. I heard my parents being forced to sit together in the dining room. It sounded like they were handcuffed, though I couldn't be sure. My mother was trying to talk to them, pleading with them not to hurt us, but they ignored her. One of the guys, his voice deep and rough, started hurling insults. "You Chinese are good at math, aren't you? How many times do I have to break this stick over your head before you answer me?"
"Come on. You wouldn't steal so much of our work if all you did was cry."
"Where's the kid?" They knew there was a child in the house. They had seen my picture in one of the pictures they had thrown to the floor. Now they were looking for me. I knew I didn't have much time before they went down to the basement. Footsteps began to sound closer to me. I knew they were coming down. One of the men was going through each room looking for me, and I heard him whisper to the other,
"He's hiding in here somewhere. He's just a boy."
My heart was pounding, so hard I thought they could hear it from the pantry. I was terrified as I'd never been before in my life. From the little alcove where I stood, I could see one of them coming down the stairs. His figure moved with a terrifying tranquility, as if he was enjoying the game. I was searching, but not in a hurry. I knew that sooner or later I would find what I was looking for. I saw him open the closet and check behind the boxes, but he hadn't found me yet. That's when I heard something that made me hold my breath. The guy shouted to my father from the stairs.
"Tell us where the brat is, or we'll kill you all."
His voice sounded serious, almost bored, as if he really didn't care about the outcome, but I knew he meant it. I may not have understood as a kid why they were doing this to us, if they weren't stealing anything, but now, a few years later, I understand everything. These people didn't care about our stuff. They didn't want to steal. They wanted to hurt us for not being American, just for being born somewhere else. The man who was searching the basement came dangerously close to my position. I could see him moving slower, inspecting every nook and cranny. I crouched a little lower, but there was no point. The man was already determined to look where I was. He was going to catch me and kill me for sure. Me and my parents. I was doomed. But just when I thought I was discovered, the other man shouted, approaching his partner. "That's enough. They said the boy went to his aunt's house."
"And do you believe them?"
"It doesn't matter. There are neighbors peeping through their windows. We have to leave now. Surely they've already called the police."
"Wait, and we'll leave them alive?"
"Do you want to take your time killing the witnesses too? And the CCTV? Didn't you see it the other day? This is purely your fault. I won't be involved in a murder if we get caught." The guy in the basement stopped, stared at where I was hiding for a few eternal seconds, and finally turned around.
"Whatever. He's probably under his bed or something."
After that, they left. They left my parents handcuffed on the floor, bloody, but alive. They didn't kill them. Maybe they thought it would be easier to get out of the situation if they didn't kill them, in case they were caught. I heard them running away, afraid that someone else would see them. I waited a few more minutes before I dared to come out of hiding. When we went up to the second floor, the house looked like a battlefield. Everything was destroyed. My parents were still on the floor, badly wounded, but breathing. I don't know how, but I found the strength to untie them. My mother could barely speak, and my father was almost unconscious. But they were still alive. The police arrived almost immediately. The men were caught a few weeks later. They didn't try to run too far. In the end, it was a hate crime. They didn't want our money. They wanted to punish us for simply existing. Seeing them in handcuffs and being brought to trial gave me a kind of relief, but it didn't erase what they did. Those men may have been arrested, but at the same time, they are still everywhere. They are in every person who gives me dirty looks on the street. Every person who thinks that because I have Chinese parents, they can make all kinds of jokes to me, sometimes quite aggressive ones. Those men are in every person who says that I came from my country to take their job. Unfortunately, it's something I will have to live with every day. But you know, as sad as it sounds, I'm used to it. Hello, my name is Lucas. I'm a very distrustful man who's basically afraid of everything. This is not by chance, since someone chased me when I was a kid, and I'm still afraid that he'll find me. This someone became a part of my day, and every time I look in the mirror, I'm afraid I'll see him peeking out, waiting for the opportunity to kill me. Everything started on a Saturday night. That night, my parents had an important engagement and couldn't take me with them, so I stayed home alone. I was 12 years old at the time, and although I felt pretty big and capable of handling myself, my parents were very hesitant to go without me. Luckily for me, the trip came up at the last minute, and no babysitter was available, so they had no choice but to leave me alone. After instructing me that they had left food on the stove and all the phone numbers to call in case something happened, they began to get ready to leave. I was really excited. I had the house all to myself. Obviously, I wasn't going to have a party or anything like that. Being 12 years old, there was really no real way to take advantage of being alone. But you know, that's not what it was all about. What mattered to me was having the freedom to be alone, to have no one tell me what time to go to bed or when to eat. I was happy because from that day on, I was sure I would always be left alone. Once my parents left, I stayed in my room, trying to distract myself with TV and some games. But I couldn't help but feel restless. I admit that my first experience of being alone was a little more frightening than I had expected. The house was too quiet, and every little noise made my hair stand on end. At the time, I couldn't help but think that this was because it was my first time being alone. I would eventually get used to it, but I could never get used to what happened next. A while passed, and I realized that I needed to go to the bathroom. I tried to ignore my fear of having to go down the dark hallway, but finally, I couldn't stand it any longer and plucked up the courage to leave my room. I walked down the hallway slowly, trying not to make noise, but all my footsteps sounded loud on the wood and made more sound than normal walking. I decided to keep the fear from overcoming me, so I ran at full speed towards the bathroom, as if trying to fool someone who was in the dark, waiting to attack me. I reached the bathroom and turned on the light, feeling a bit of relief to see that everything was in order. Just as I was about to finish, I heard a noise coming from the living room, and I stood still, trying to listen better. What was that noise? Had something fallen? Or had someone entered the house? I stayed focused, trying to hear another noise, and even though I didn't want it to happen, I managed to hear something else, something much clearer. The laughter of a child. Something as simple as the laughter of a child who could easily be my neighbor left me terrified. My muscles tensed and my heart began to pound. Who the hell would be laughing in my house at this time of night? I left the bathroom and headed towards the living room, trying not to make a sound. With each step, the laughter grew louder and clearer. The laughter was going back and forth as if it was running and laughing for no reason. When I reached the living room, I froze. In the center of the room, standing next to the couch, was a man. A man I didn't recognize. He was staring up at the ceiling, a twisted smile on his face. My first impulse was to scream, but something in me stopped. What if this man was dangerous? What if he had a gun? I stood still, watching him in fear. Surely an adult would have acted better, but what could a little boy like me do? The man finally looked down at me, and his smile widened even more. Then he spoke, but his voice was strange but familiar. It was the child's voice I heard before. It was as if he was trying to imitate a child's voice.
"What are you doing up, little buddy? You should be in bed at this time of night."
I gulped and backed away slowly, looking for something to defend myself with. The man took a step towards me, and then I knew I had to act fast. I ran towards the front door, my heart pounding so hard I thought it was going to burst out of my chest. But just as I was about to reach for the door, the man grabbed my arm and stopped me in my tracks, pulling me to the floor.
"Oh, no. You're going with me now. Don't you want to play?"
"No, I don't want to play. Please go away. I'm afraid."
"No. What are you afraid of, little buddy? We're just two kids wanting to have fun. Why don't we play a game? Later, I promise to leave."
"Will you really leave?"
"Of course. Best friend promise."
"Oh, okay. What do you want to play?"
"My favorite game is hide and seek. We can play all night. Oh, boy. What's wrong with you?"
"I'm scared."
"Don't be afraid. It's just a game. You'll hide and I'll look for you. You have 1 minute. If I don't find you, you win. If I find you, I'll tie you to a chair, and you'll see how I killed Mom and Dad."
"What?"
"First, I'll break Dad's legs. Then I'll beat Mom until she's almost passed out. And when I'm done, I'll chop them both up while you watch. You want to know what I'll do next? Please, let me go. Then I'll kidnap you and lock you in my basement. And you know what I'll do to you?" "Do you know what I'll do to you?"
"No."
"Nothing. I'll leave you in the basement and never give you food or water. You'll die, and no one will know where you are. Isn't that great, my little friend? Why are you doing this? You should know. We're both kids, and we both like to have fun. Or don't you like hide and seek? Now go, run. I'll start counting."
Desperate, I ran as fast as I could. I thought about running away from the house anyway. He had his back turned, but if I did that, he would surely kill my parents when they came back. I decided to play his game and go hide. I went to my parents' room, the place where I always hid when I played alone. I was going to go behind the curtain, under the bed, in the closet, but all those places were so obvious. I was sure to be found. I thought and thought as much as I could, but nothing came to my mind, until it occurred to me. I moved one of the pieces of furniture that was in a corner, and I stood behind it. There was no way he could see me there. I put the furniture back and hid. Now, I just had to wait. Seconds passed, and I could hear the man coming. And that's when it hit me. The light. I never turned off the light. All the rooms were turned off before. He will surely notice. I thought about going to turn off the light, but it was too late. I could hear him approaching, humming a children's song. He was getting closer and closer, and as soon as he saw the lights on, he realized I was there.
Little friend, unless this is just to distract me, I must confess you started the game wrong.
Once he was inside the room, the psycho started looking for me everywhere. He kicked the bed, broke the curtains, destroyed everything he saw in his path. There was only one place left to check, and he approached it laughing as if he knew I was there. The man approached in slow motion as if enjoying every second before meeting me. He had no reason to think I was hiding behind that piece of furniture, but he seemed to know it perfectly. When I saw that he was about to arrive, fear overcame me, and I closed my eyes, praying that he would just go away. I spent seconds with my eyes closed, and he didn't come closer. Was he gone? I opened them for just a moment, and there he was. His face was staring at me over the top of the cabinet. He had a big, innocent, boyish grin on his face, and he looked so happy to have found me. As soon as he saw me, I tried to run to another room, but he easily grabbed me and put me against the wall.
You lost.
I used all my strength to escape, but I couldn't. We're talking about an adult who looked like a child. There was no way I could overcome him with brute strength. As if in ecstasy of having caught me, the man pulled out a knife and showed it to me, as if to indicate that this was what awaited me. I screamed as loud as I could. I knew it was useless, but I had to do it. And to my surprise, it worked. Suddenly, I heard the door and my parents came running to protect me. Once they got to the room, I was alone on the floor. Had the man left? My parents hugged me, crying. They didn't look for my attacker and didn't seem confused about what was happening, just sad. As soon as they finished hugging me, they took me to the hospital to treat my wounds. I told them that there was a man dressed as a boy in the house, but they seemed to ignore me and only responded by looking at me in such a way as if they felt pity. At the time, I didn't understand what was going on, but over the years, I did. It's been 10 years since I suffered that traumatic event at my home. You know, I've suffered many more like it. That man dressed as a boy is always harassing me. He shows up when I least expect it, and he always tries to hurt me. Do you know when he stopped showing up? When I started taking the medication the doctors gave me. My name is Jared, and I have multiple personality disorder. My other personality may not be as developed as mine, but I know that another person lives inside my head. The story I just told you was exactly as I remember it. But that's not really what happened. The truth is that there is someone of mine who wants to kill me, and that night was not the first time it happened, but it was just the one I remembered the most. Today, as long as I take my medication, I feel much safer. But you know, I know that person is still inside me, waiting for me to be weak, waiting for me not to take my medication, waiting for me to make any mistake that he can take advantage of, to come out and get rid of me.
I remember that day and that moment as if it had just happened. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I was trying to go visit my cousins in a cabin they had rented during the vacations. The cabin was beautiful, all the luxuries, but the drive to get there was the problem. I admit, I am a bit impulsive, and I didn't want to take too long a road, so I took a route suggested by the GPS, which was supposed to be the fastest way, although it looked pretty ugly. I was on a very small and totally uninhabited trail, clearly not a place I wanted to stay too long. The place had something I didn't like, a feeling of abandonment. Not a road sign, not a house for miles, just trees and a gravel road that crunched under the wheels of my car. The first sign that something was wrong appeared when I saw a pickup truck blocking the road ahead. I slowed down and approached carefully. The back of the vehicle was open, and 2 men were removing something large from inside. At first, I thought they'd had a problem. Possibly the back doors of the van had opened and the bags had fallen out. After getting a little closer, I realized that they hadn't dropped anything. They were dumping garbage in the woods. Huge black battered sacks which they were throwing on the ground without any care. I am a very cautious person, don't confuse me, but I am also an active environmentalist. And when I see someone irresponsible messing with nature, I get angry. The men were imposing and they weren't looking at me in a very friendly way. My body tensed, but anger was quicker than fear. I rolled down the window and shouted, "Hey, you can't leave that here! Get out of here, or I'll call the police!" One of the men, the most imposing, turned his head toward me. His face was covered with sweat. From the look on his face, he didn't like my answer at all. "What did you say? Who do you think you are?" I didn't answer. I realized that I couldn't move forward. The van covered absolutely the whole road. The second man, thinner but with an even more disturbing look, appeared from behind the van. Both moved as if they were used to intimidating people. "Hey, are you filming?" "Give me your phone." At that moment, I noticed the men approaching quickly. This was no longer an environmental discussion or a bad work practice. I was filming and seeing something I shouldn't be. At that moment, my survival instinct kicked in. I put the car in reverse and stepped on the gas. The burly man reacted quickly. He lunged toward the driver's window and managed to grab the frame. For a second, I thought he had it on him, but the sudden movement of the car threw him off balance. He fell to the ground with a thud, and I accelerated backward like crazy. The other men stayed with the one who fell, making sure he was okay. I hadn't gone more than 20 meters when everything came to a screeching halt. I felt a brutal impact on the right side of the car. Another vehicle, a gray pickup truck I had not seen before, had come out of the woods and rammed into me with full force. The car spun on itself and ended up stopped in the middle of the road, the engine coughing as it was about to shut down. Before I could react, the driver's door burst open. One of the men grabbed my arm and dragged me out of the car as if I weighed nothing. I tried to hit him, to scratch him, but his strength was superior. "Let me go!" "Save your energies. No one will listen to you here." I tried to resist, but all to no avail. They put me in the back of the van, next to the huge black sacks they stopped throwing because of me. The smell was unbearable, a mixture of dried blood and rotting flesh. For a moment, I thought they were human. But because of the size, it was impossible. I think they were pieces of rotten animal flesh or something. Whatever it was the most disturbing thing I ever smelled in my life. The vehicle stopped in a clearing in the woods, in front of a rickety shack that looked like it was about to collapse. They yanked me out and carried me inside, where I was thrown on the ground like another one of those sacks. The place was littered with tools and bloodstains. In one corner was a pile of sacks like the ones I saw before, but some were open. They weren't just trash. They were bodies, dismembered, stained with dirt and blood, as if they had been treated as waste. "What do we do with this one?" "The usual." "What are you going to do with me? You don't have to do this. Please let me go." They talked about me like I wasn't there. I cried and screamed the whole trip, but it was useless. They just ignored me. They didn't seem scared or bothered by me. They were just really indifferent to my suffering. After driving for a while, the man took me to a warehouse in the middle of the forest. They weren't alone. There was also the guy who crashed into me. He looked visibly more nervous. He seemed very scared. They tied me to a chair with a rope that looked sturdy, but as I moved, I realized that they had done a sloppy job. The knot was not tight. While the men were arguing in another room, I began to move my wrists carefully, pulling and twisting until I felt the rope give way. When I managed to free myself, my heart was pounding. I knew I had to be quick and quiet, but I became nervous and instinctively ran as fast as I could. I advanced toward the back door, but my escape was short-lived. One of the men ran after me, and by the time I realized it, he was already behind me. His reaction was instantaneous. He grabbed me by the hair and threw me to the ground. I tried to kick him, but the big guy came and pinned me down. This time, I was bound with duct tape, making sure I couldn't move an inch. The back door opened, and in came the other man who looked like he had been in the bathroom all this time. His face was pale, and his eyes showed a nervousness that the others did not have. "This is bad." "Shut up and do your job." The young man looked at me. His hands were shaking, but his expression changed.
As the other two went outside to move more of the sacks, he reached over and began cutting the duct tape. "I can't let them kill you. This is my fault. I didn't want to hit you, but I was afraid and reacted without thinking. Do you know what they would have done to me if I didn't? Hey, calm down. Please, release me. I don't want to die. I'll pretend nothing happened." My words seemed to calm him down. When he released me, he motioned for me to follow him to the back of the hut. When we arrived, he held his hand out. "Here, take this." Before I could respond, the shouts of the other men echoed through the cabin. They had noticed our absence. "Run now!" I jumped into the car and started up just as they came running toward me. "Hey, he got away from me. She attacked me and ran away. Stop her!" I arrived at the police station covered in dust and shaking. I could barely speak, but I managed to tell them what happened to me. I gave them directions, details of the men, and everything I could remember. Hours later, the officers found the cabin. All 3 men were found, including the one who had helped me. The only problem is how they found him. He was dead. He was drowned in the toilet until he lost his life. Apparently, I didn't come across some simple workers throwing away a package. That was the mafia, and even though they were not human corpses, the video I took was able to unmask their dealings with several restaurants. The police said to take care of me that there would be patrol cars near my house and that they would put me in witness protection. But to be honest with you, I am scared. I am very afraid. Afraid that I won't catch up, and that sooner or later, those men or others will find me.
The day Kendra brought that doll home, something changed. She bought it at a thrift store, saying it reminded her of one from her childhood. It was a Raggedy Ann doll, with red wool hair and those black buttons that served as eyes. She looked old, battered by the years. I couldn't understand why anyone would want such a toy, but Kendra was thrilled with her. She named her Darla and left her on a chair in her room as if she were a part of the decor. I paid no attention to her at first. We lived in a fairly large cottage with only a few neighbors next door and enough space for each of us to do what we wanted without disturbing the other. Kendra and I were cousins, almost like siblings. We grew up together after her parents died in an accident, and when we turned 20, we decided to pool our resources and rent a house in the country to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city. Life was quiet, or at least it had been, until that doll arrived. I can't say I noticed anything strange right away, but what started as a slight discomfort being around Darla grew into something more. It wasn't just the doll that made me nervous, but how Kendra started acting. She would stare at it for hours as if in a trance, whispering things that I couldn't understand. When I would ask her what she was saying, she would reply that Darla could hear her better than anyone else. Things got weirder when Kendra started locking herself in her room. She would go for hours without coming out, and when she did, her behavior was distant, as if she was thinking about something she didn't want to share with me. One night as we were eating dinner, she dropped the silverware with a thud and looked at me with chilling seriousness. "Darla told me you don't trust me." I tried to confront her the next day, but to no avail. She was more reserved than ever, whispering to the doll as if she were having a secret conversation. The atmosphere in the house became suffocating, as if something invisible was stalking us. And then, the noises began. Banging in the night, laughter that didn't come from either of us, objects appearing out of place. At first, I thought it was Kendra, but the more time that passed, the more I became convinced that something wasn't right. One day I found the doll sitting in the kitchen. I was sure Kendra had left it in her room, so I went to ask her. But when I looked for her, Kendra wasn't there. The house was empty. Things got worse quickly. Kendra started spending all day with the doll, talking to it as if it were a real person. She stopped eating and barely slept, and when she did, it was a restless sleep, riddled with mumbling. I tried to get her out of the house, to convince her that the doll was affecting her mind, but she was increasingly resistant. That night I heard loud banging coming from her room. I rushed over and found her standing in front of her mirror, with Darla in her arms. Her face was pale, her eyes bloodshot, and her mouth was moving. But I couldn't understand what she was saying. I tried to snatch the doll from her, but Kendra screamed in a voice that wasn't hers, a scream that didn't sound human. She threw me out of the room and slammed the door shut. From then on, she wouldn't let me in. Something dark was taking over, and I didn't know how to stop it. I decided I could no longer ignore what was happening. That doll, Darla, had to go. One night while Kendra was sleeping, I went into her room and took the doll away. I knew I had to get rid of it. I walked into the woods behind the house and threw it into a pit that I had quickly dug. I felt as if something was watching me as I buried her, but I didn't care. When I got back to the house, the lights were out. I called to Kendra, but she didn't answer. I went upstairs to her room and found it empty. The bed was unmade and on the floor. There were deep marks as if someone had scratched the floor in desperation. The air in the room was thick, suffocating. And then I saw her. Kendra was standing in the corner covered in dirt, with the same smile as the doll. She was just looking at me. Her body looked strange, as if her every movement was forced, dislocated. Her shoulders were twisted unnaturally, her neck drooping to one side as if she were a puppet with tangled strings. The feeling of panic hit me immediately. She began to walk slowly towards me, and when she was a few feet away from me, her speed suddenly changed. Kendra ran towards me with inordinate force, and before I could react, she threw me to the ground with violence that didn't seem possible in her small body. I fell backward, hitting my head on the ground, and everything was spinning. Kendra lunged at me, her cold hands closing around my neck. I tried to scream, but I couldn't breathe. The pressure in my throat was increasing, her fingers digging into my skin with inhuman force. Then, suddenly, the front door burst open. Several voices shouted something that I couldn't understand. During the confusion, I saw uniformed figures rush into the room. I tried to call for help, but Kendra was gone. She had vanished as if she had never been there. The policemen approached me, but instead of helping me, they threw me down hard. I felt the coldness of metal on my wrists as they cuffed me, pressing my face into the ground. I was too confused to understand what was happening. The officers roughly lifted me and dragged me outside. The cops locked me in a cage for hours, days, and even weeks passed without any of them explaining what was going on. Until one day, they sat me in a dark room with a single spotlight over my head. My thoughts were in chaos, trying to process what had happened. But then the door opened, and 2 policemen came in. Why? Why did you do it? Do what? Why did you attack your sister and bury her alive? What? Come on, we've been through this. You always give us the same answer. You're not helping. Are you doing this so we don't condemn you? Is that it? Do you think a mental hospital is better than jail? Some neighbors saw you with the body. You don't have to lie. We already found her. We got there just in time. Kendra barely survived. She already talked to us. She told us that you've been obsessed with a doll since the day you bought it, that you started acting strangely, more and more violent. Kendra tried to get you away from the doll, but you would get angry, until one night you hit her. You dragged her outside and buried her alive, with the doll by your side. No bells ringing for you? No, it was Kendra with the doll, not me. The cops looked at each other, looking like they were giving up. I recognized that face. They were looking at a person who had gone crazy. It was at that moment that I began to consider that maybe they were right. Maybe it wasn't Kendra who was possessed. Maybe it was me. All along, it had been me who had been under her influence. The doll was never the one controlling Kendra. I was the one who had changed, who had become obsessed with her. And Kendra, in her desperation, had tried to save me. It can't be. The images came to my mind like a wave. Me, with the doll in my hands. Me hitting Kendra and burying her. It was always me. I was led back to my cell as the officer's words echoed in my ears. Kendra would not press charges. She decided to not go any further. But that didn't change anything. I ended up in a mental institution, under constant observation. Kendra sometimes came to visit me. When I first saw the bruises on her face, I would start crying. She always tells me it wasn't my fault, that I was under the influence of the doll. She believes that it wasn't me, that I was possessed. To make matters worse, the doll never reappeared after that day. I think I can get out of here someday. Kendra has faith in my recovery. But I don't know if I want to get out. What will happen if that doll shows up again? If I'm not cured? At this point, the best thing I can do is to be locked up, so I'm not a danger to myself or my cousin.